right, hello there, and welcome to this third episode of Product Musings. This is actually going to be a short form episode. I'm going to try to quickly get to the gist and ideas that I want to for really a more long form episode, which will come later. But I know not everyone wants to sit down and listen to 35, 40 minutes of a product deep dive, and so I want to try to get that across in about just 7 or 8 minutes for maybe those possibly short rides you're on. And if you're interested, and if it piques your interest enough to get the full, deeper insights, feel free to listen to the longer edition, which will be coming out here pretty soon. But in this quick segment, I want to talk about Clubhouse. What happened to Clubhouse, and ultimately why I think a lot of what you read perhaps doesn't get to the real reasons and the root causes of why Clubhouse is no longer as prominent as it once was. Clubhouse, if you're unfamiliar, was a app that really launched right at the beginning of COVID-19 and had incredible growth. It really was seen as a massive future major player in the media market. The idea behind it was that you could sign on, join different rooms, which are audio only, and listen to specific speakers who were talking live to that room. And these speakers were oftentimes, especially early on, some really heavy hitters. Elon Musk is always said as one of the biggest ones, but you also had Drake, you had Oprah on several, Mark Zuckerberg, Chris Rock, comedians, etc. were really doing these opportunities to sort of have live interactions with their fans. Massive growth, saw upwards a valuation of $4 billion, and then it all went away. And it went away over just a few months, and now Clubhouse is just really a shell of its former self, and has actually rebranded, new vision, new goal. It's no longer an audio chat room. It's more of a message-based solution, and is no longer at all what it once was. So what happened? Well, if you read a lot of articles, they'll talk about a few things, but the biggest one they always like to talk on is exclusivity. Clubhouse was invite only, and oftentimes they talk about how this killed the application from the start. And I think that's a poor representation of what actually happened. In fact, I think exclusivity is what helped in many different ways. Exclusivity can be a big boon for a lot of companies, and you've seen that in the past. It worked very well for Gmail. It worked well for Facebook in some ways. It worked well for really a lot of these solutions that start out as pretty tightly knit organizations and groups. It doesn't work well for others. Google Plus is always a great example of where that failed. For Clubhouse, I think the proof is in the pudding in the sense that they had massive growth. They had millions upon millions of monthly active listeners at their peak. The idea behind exclusivity is that everyone wanted to get in because they heard that Elon Musk was talking live, and that maybe they would have a chance to get in to ask a question as well and actually have a longer form conversation with him. And you saw this power in not just the fact that people were starting to sell these invites, but everyone wanted to get in on it. And this exclusivity really worked for them because you didn't need to have, for example, in the Google Plus scenario, a situation where you have to invite your friends in order to get any value out of it. In fact, it worked much more in the Gmail concept, where just having that tool itself and getting an invite to that tool itself is phenomenal. It'd be like getting an invite to Microsoft Word before any good word processors. Yeah, that's what you want because Word is great and it's seamless. And you don't need to have your friends also using Word to be able to get a ton of value out of Microsoft Word. That's why this exclusivity factor worked really well, because they were able to have this very high quality brand that everyone wanted to get in on, high quality users, high quality sort of speakers as well. And in doing that, they were able to really push this elusiveness of being able to get. But once you got in, it didn't require you to also have friends to get any value or already an expanded network. Instead, it just worked really well on its own. Now, what ultimately I think hurt was not the fact that it was exclusive for too long, but the fact that exclusivity went away. And in doing so, the bar for quality and content diminished dramatically. And if you look at what happens in that exclusivity framework, suddenly you have tons of people that have no real idea of the quality of what's expected on a place like Clubhouse. Being able to create rooms, you see a lot more unbridled messages, a lot more harmful content, racism. You see a ton of rooms that are focused on really scams or conspiracy theories, or a ton around, of course, as you expect, the crypto world. really talking about all these different areas. And in doing so, you no longer have people like Elon Musk wanting to attach themselves to that organization, talking about the future of deep space. Instead, it just becomes a plethora of low quality content that ultimately people don't want to listen to. And yes, of course, it was a sort of media darling of the COVID-19 era, of course, being in that radio sort of, not radio, but rather that live talk framework worked really well for people when they were staying at home. But I also think that would work really well in many ways today. And podcasts are still very well used. Everyone listens to talk radio still, especially on their drives to work. And you can still leverage a lot of those same solutions. Perhaps it'd have to be tweaked a little bit. But ultimately, it would still be a great solution, I believe, in today's day and age, if done well. But ultimately, that bar had been dramatically lowered. And again, in a longer form, I'll maybe talk a little bit more about the examples and how they, each individual example that I mentioned and some others as well, where they went well, where they went wrong, and how you can cross-compare those, as well as some other concepts around the brand problems. But ultimately, I think exclusivity worked very well for Clubhouse. And its downfall was opening up to everyone so fast and not having any real moderation on the quality of that content going forward. And then the second piece I want to talk about, really honing in on product management specifically, is you often hear Clubhouse was just a feature and it wasn't a full product. And you can look at, Twitter's now copied it in many ways. There's some other solutions out there that are also doing the same. And this, I think, could not be further from the truth. There are so many products out there that either start as just features or have full products, but they're really only focusing in on one feature itself. And that's what's great. Take Instagram, for example, which wasn't at all focused on their photo app. That wasn't their focus when they actually first launched. But it was the killer feature they had. And so when they actually shelved the rest of the product and said, we're just going to focus on this one feature and build that up, that's how you become $1 billion business in 18 months like they did. You can look at other features sort of in that general space or products that kind of build and really hone in. For example, Twitter, which was a network-based solution and was really at the time sometimes mocked as just the Facebook status portion, right? But it did it better than Facebook status could. And you had this ability to quickly follow all these different people within your expanded network or that you were following that were in the multimedia space. And that ability made it not just a feature, but the absolute best version of that feature, which in and of itself is a product. And so you can have a product that has a ton of features, but if none of those features are great, no one's going to want to stick around. If you don't have a feature that everyone says, this is why I come, that 90-10 feature, right? People getting 90% of the value from 10% of features. If you don't have one of those 90-10 solutions, it doesn't matter if you're building this whole product around it. You just have a bunch of stuff that's not really great at all. Real quick side point, I think there's a lot of features, a lot of products like that in the product management space that try to help product managers that really sort of fall into that category. I'll maybe one day talk about all these different product manager tools that I feel just don't hit great on any of the features. But getting back to it, is Clubhouse just a feature or product? Yeah, probably just a feature, and that is a product. There is no sort of separation between those two in many ways. Take for example, Snapchat. Snapchat was just a feature for that you saw Facebook try to mimic with what was called Slingshot. That went very poorly despite having a full product around it. But ultimately, Snapchat survived because it was the best version of that ephemeral photo sharing opportunity. And of course, there's others on the other side that, were just features and they weren't the best. Take, for example, Vine, which was a feature and it was very good for a while, but ultimately did not stay the best version of that feature. Really limiting you in your time frame and what you could actually share was a huge killer over time. You can look at Quibi, another one. Even in the space of short form media going large, Quibi's version implementation of it failed dramatically. And of course, COVID didn't do it any benefits as well. But I think from a product standpoint, it had a lot of misses. And so when you look at these two questions, one, was it the exclusivity that killed it? I'd say no. I'd say there was a lot more going around it, and exclusivity actually helped in many ways. And then also this general concept, people say it's just a feature, not a product. I'd really scrap that entire thinking. While yes, you can have that concept in general, to try to say they're mutually exclusive, I think it's just wrong. I hope this quick 10-minute intro, though, has been interesting enough. If you want to learn a lot deeper of the dive into Clubhouse and why I believe it failed from a product perspective, tune into the longer form version. And until then, hope you have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.